Hawaii Entertainment News, where we will talk about all the news that's happening around the film and entertainment industry in Hawaii.
You're supposed to say, I told you so.
Enough! Are you okay?
Oh my gosh, he's Superman!
This is a video game, which means we all have special skills.
I'm Yayoi Winfrey, and you can reach me at Watermelon Sushi at me.com, or you can find me on Facebook. I'm under Yayoi L. Naito Winfrey.
Scene one, take one.
I really see myself as a writer, director, editor. I just really like the creative process. Just, some few words on a piece of paper, and then you have a story, and you can visualize it, and then you get behind the camera, you can direct it, and then you help edit it, and there it is. That's the part I really enjoy doing. But I'm also aware of all the other, components, because you just have to be of any film, small commercials, music videos. I just like that, having that vision, and then directing, your team to create that vision, and then there it is, and it's just so joyful, I think, to be able to do that. Yeah, like giving birth, I guess, yeah. Well, so interestingly, while I was in LA, I wanted to make a film called Watermelon Sushi that's based on my family of being Japanese and Black and growing up that way. Yeah, the two most stereotypical foods, right? But we did have that on the table. Every night we had white rice, but then my dad, he's from Texas, so we got all this soul food. My mom had to learn how to cook that. And so, yeah, that was, it's a narrative that I actually started filming while I was in LA. I didn't finish it, ran out of money. And then later on, I started thinking, well, I'm telling the daughter's story in this. There's two daughters in it. But I should really go back and tell the mother's story. And then that's when I thought I should make a documentary about my mother and tell the War Bride story. And the irony of it is the person who most pushed me into doing that, and with that thought, is a filmmaker from Hawaii, but he was living in Seattle at the time. And I met him in Seattle. And he met my mother, and he said, we should make a film about your mother. She's such a character, Yeah, so that's where it began. But I would like to finish Watermelon Sushi. I think that kind of explains my generation, this generation of mixed race kids. I think that was the largest, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the largest group of, because there were 50,000 Japanese war brides. And so if each of them had 2 or 3 kids, I think we were the largest group of mixed race kids on the mainland at that time, in that time period. And there was nothing like there is now. Now you got, Hapa Issues Forum, you've got all these, Hafu and, mixed race groups that discuss these things. We didn't have that. And it was very, very interesting growing up, because again, you have this person whose entire background is Japanese, but she's trying to teach you how to assimilate into this Western American culture, but she doesn't really know, so you're kind of learning together. So now I think it's a more open, more people would be open to a film like this, that they might want to see something, what we call a double minority, how does that work? How does a household work when you have a foreign parent and the other parent, they don't really match, in color and skin color and culture and language, anything, they're not a match set. How does that work for the kids growing up in an environment like that? Well, we never thought about it. It was just natural for us until we went outside and people were like, well, how come I can't understand what your mother's saying and blah, 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 Then you start thinking, wow, what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me, Japanese culture is very old too. African Americans, we've been here 400 years, trying to, have a culture, trying to have our own ethnic culture.
Yes.
Whereas Japan, they've had that, and they were isolated, and so they developed it over 2,000 years. So everybody knows what the rules are. Everybody knows what's expected of them. We don't know where we came from.
Yeah, 'cause
That's
we
a
don't have
big
no
thing. We don't know where we came from.
Yeah.
You know, Japanese, they do Bonodori, Obon festival every year because for their ancestors, everything's about their ancestors and this, and you know, you can have a koseki of your lineage. You know, we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's a big thing.
I totally
What are we connected to if we don't know? And Watermelon Sushi really mirrors our upbringing, my sister and myself, because as you know, on the mainland at the time, it was always, well, we grew up primarily after we got off the military bases. We were in Japan, Texas, Germany. We ended up in Washington State. And when my parents bought a house, they bought a house in a previously all-white neighborhood. And we went to all-white schools.
Okay.
We stood out like a sore thumb. And people want to know, you know, what are you? Where are you from? You know, where are you really from? You know, and you're like, I'm from here. No, where are you really from? You must be from somewhere else because you don't look like us, you know. And so you start kind of shrinking into yourself. You don't want anybody looking at you because it's always a bunch of questions leading to, you know, it's kind of like apartheid South Africa. Where's your pass? Are you allowed here? I don't think you're allowed in here because you don't look like us, you know. Low self-esteem because, yeah, you don't ever, in my days, you pick up a fashion magazine or something, there's nobody that looks remotely like you. Yeah, you could get Ebony, Jet, but, you know, that's segregated. That's all black. And then you have all these white people in this other magazine. Where are the in-between people,
Right.
you know?
Right. I agree.
Don't exist.
I agree.
And so it was, and then you have the mother speaking, you know, all these foreign words and making this food that you never see on TV. You don't see, you know, Leave It to Beaver eating sushi and tempura and, you know, miso, like, you know, like, are we weird? Like, we've got this. And then my dad's got his barbecue and pork chops and, you know, it's just so strange. But yeah, until, you know, you hit that certain adolescence, then you're like, oh my God, what's wrong with us? There's something wrong with our family. We don't belong here.
Aloha, this is Leilani Ke Aloha with Hawaii Entertainment News. Emerging from this pandemic to appear on the Hawaii Theater, the Phoenix Dance Chamber presented Celestial, a virtual dance concert celebrating the Chinese diaspora, with 20% of ticket sales donated to the AAPI Community Fund. Daddy Longlegs opened at the Manoa Valley Theater to great applause to both live audiences and streaming audiences. Beauty and the Beast opens at the Hilo Palace Theater on July 16th. 30 Days with Bretman Rock is now live on YouTube. Watch as he finds himself and reconnects with Brett after being Bretman Rock for so long. The Hawaii Youth Symphony played at the Waikiki Shell. 2 of our graduating seniors won the Nahoku Opio Young Stars competition. Congratulations to violinist Aaron Nishi and cellist Mira Hu. We are so proud of you. Hawaii-born singer-songwriter Irie Love comes back to the Blue Note for one night only, an evening of cosmic acoustic soul on Sunday, July 11th. Eddie Ortiz and Son Caribe's new original single, Cántalo, has just debuted on the New Gen Salsa Top 65 international charts at number 58. Also designated as a projected pick hit. Congratulations to all of these dedicated and talented musicians on their success. Britney Spears spent some time on Maui after her conservatorship hearing. On the day Britney set off for Hawaii, she penned a letter on social media, apologizing for pretending to be fine all these years. As the pop star wrote, "I don't want people to think my life is perfect, because it's definitely not at all. And if you have read anything about me in the news this week, you obviously really know now it's not." She went on, "I apologize for pretending like I've been okay the past 2 years. I did it because of my pride, and I was embarrassed to share what happened to me. A new documentary uncovers the Jimi Hendrix nearly forgotten Maui concert in 1970. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the release of the film Rainbow Bridge. Shot on Maui in 1971 with amateur actors and without a script, the film centered on the late 1960s counterculture on the island. It also included a live performance by rock legend Jimi Hendrix on July 30th, 1970. But that footage amounted to about 15 minutes at the end of a 2-hour film. The music was not included in the film's soundtrack, and the public never got to see or hear the full performance. Until now, that is. There's a new documentary, Music, Money, Madness, Jimi Hendrix in Maui, about the nearly forgotten Hendrix concert in the middle of an upcountry Maui pasture at the base of Haleakalai. Now let's watch some video from the Merry Monarch Festival that happened last weekend. This is Leilani Kealoha reporting for Hawaii Entertainment News.
Well, War Brides of Japan is a documentary that I wanted to make because my mother's a Japanese war bride. So she was one of these people that never stopped talking. From the moment you woke up in the morning, she's telling you her story. She's telling you about how the bombs were dropping. She's telling you how they had to run to bomb shelters and, you know, just the horrors that she saw in the street, you know, bodies and children and people's houses on fire. And, you know, when the Americans came, and those stories too of how they intermingled with them, because the U.S. military, when it arrived in Japan post-war, they became the largest employers in Japan. And, you know, by then Japan was devastated. There was no economy. And I think something like 2 million Japanese men had died, you know, either in the Japanese military or just from the bombing. So there was a lack of Japanese workforce from the men. So the women went to work. And, you know, at first it was very standoffish because this is our former enemies. These are the people that dropped the bombs on us. But the American military, the men were so chivalrous. They were so, you know, pulling chairs out for women. They weren't used to that. Japanese culture, they didn't do that. You know, women walked behind the men and the men made all the decisions. But here comes this military. They're bringing you gifts, nylon stockings, you know, boxes of chocolates, and really, you know, just pursuing these women. And I have a trailer called The Chase, and every one of those people talk about how their father went after their mother. That's the one I want to go out with, and, you know, she's putting him off. So it's very interesting how the dynamics worked. And then they had to pass the War Brides Act and they did that primarily for the European war brides, because they couldn't bring them to the U.S. At the time, there was 1924 immigration ban. Nobody from Asia was allowed to come into the United States. You had to be white and European to immigrate to the U.S. So they had to go through this and create this War Brides Act of 1945 to even allow these women to come with their husbands to the U.S. And so, you know, she's telling me these stories all my life, and that's why I developed such an interest in it. Like, how do you marry your enemy? Like, how do you marry these people that bombed you? And some people lost family members, and, you know, a lot of them had like small businesses that were destroyed. How could they forgive these people so much to the point of spending the rest of their lives with them, having their families with them, having children with them? There's something to it, right? Like in Hawaii, that they have Ho'oponopono, the system of forgiveness. And I think that's what these war brides were doing in their own way, you know? Men really pursued them, and then they were kind of like, wow, you know, I've never been treated like this before. Taking my coat for me, and, you know, the gifts and everything. And so, you know, in Japan at the time, there were arranged marriages still. And if you're a female, you don't have any rights. You marry who your family says you're going to marry, and that's it. You're out of the picture. And so, they were also, I like to say these women were also feminists in a way. They were the first to like really work outside the home like that and in enemy territory, and able to make their own decisions about who they want. Now, some of them did get disowned by their families, never spoke to them ever again in life, once they left for the U.S. But so, yeah, it's a huge topic, and it was something that I was interested in because of my mother's stories, and that's why I wanted to tell it. And then once you got out there, you realized there were so many different stories because a lot of it had to do with who they married. If they married somebody Caucasian, somebody black. I have somebody in the film whose father was Mexican American. I have somebody in the film whose father was half black and half Mexican American. And so their experiences are all different. And depending on where they ended up living, in the U.S. At the time, until 1967, there were still 16 states that practiced anti-miscegenation laws. They had those laws on the book. So if you were white, you could only marry a white person, period. So a lot of these soldiers, they couldn't bring their brides back home to where they were from, until after Loving versus Virginia. And so, yeah, there's the story, the Japanese war brides, or I call it War Brides of Japan, that story is just so rich in diversity. There's so much to it. Because it's such an obscure part of the history that's taught to us, at least in the U.S. and probably in Japan as well, I just wanted people to honor these women, that they really went through a lot. They had war bride schools in Japan that some of them attended, so they learned some English and they learned Western ways. I mean, in Japan back then, people were still sleeping on futons on the floor. You eat on the low tables, all these Japanese foods. They didn't know what American, type of foods were going to be like. And so they just sacrificed so much. And like I said, some were disowned. They never got to go back home. Just to look towards the future after a devastating war like that. They had a lot of hope, that had to be some positive thing within them, that they felt like, I can marry this foreigner who helped wreak havoc on my country. I'm going to go to where he lives and it's going to be fine. I'm going to have kids, and that's a lot of optimism, Yeah. And back then, no long distance telephone calls, no international flights. They were just, I think, very costly. So it wasn't like you could just go back home and visit your parents anytime. Right. It took about 10 years for most of the brides to be able to go back home to visit their families there. You're writing letters, airmail letters. That's it. That's your only contact with what you left behind. In this new foreign place, they don't have Japanese food. My mother went to Texas, and it was segregated, and she didn't understand that. Like, I have to stay on this side. Those people can go on that side. She had to have Japanese food shipped in to her from her friends on the East Coast in New Jersey, because they didn't have it in this little small town in Texas. So I just really want to honor these women and everything they went through, and just acknowledge that they existed. A lot of them are gone now. My mom's gone too. Well, I released them myself on a platform where people could, video on demand, where they could rent it. Yeah, it still takes a lot of marketing, and, I didn't, because I'm a one-person show practically. I've been doing everything. I haven't spent enough time marketing. Probably the biggest issue for almost any filmmaker is getting that connection to somebody who has that ability and can do that for you. You're always ending up talking to people that are, maybe not the decision makers. They're not the ones that are going to be able to greenlight something. So when you can go directly to somebody in charge, a distributor, or somebody that is looking for your particular type of material or subject area, the communications needs to be there. Right. And that's what I think, is kind of a tough area. But I do have a lot of knowledge about the studio system, which I got involved with in Los Angeles, and it is very cutthroat. I had a script that I co-wrote with somebody, and we took it to a major studio, And they took it and they made their own movie with it. And we saw it 2-3 years later on the screen. And, at that point, it's too late, really. There's not much you can do unless you have a lot of money and you're okay being in litigation for 5 years and paying your attorneys. And it was just something we couldn't do. So the studio system is really brutal. There's a lot of people fighting for their power position, and they're all making a lot of money. And I would just really caution filmmakers who, want to go into that end of filmmaking. But yeah, as an independent filmmaker, I love it because it's hands-on, and especially as the person who filmed and edited, I can create that story the way I want. And then I do enjoy working with other independent filmmakers because they're going to have, very similar skill sets and, vision. So, yeah, how a studio project is developed and ends up in distribution versus independent filmmaking, which is always somewhat of a struggle, fundraising and then getting those platforms to distribute your films. So, yeah, that's, unfortunately haven't had that experience too much in Hawaii because, as you know, the industry here is not as broad as in somewhere like LA. When I went to Los Angeles, I joined the California Lawyers for the Arts. They had seminars all the time, and they would give you information how to copyright and protect yourself. But it's still difficult. I mean, they're just bigger than you are. The studio has a legal department with who knows how many lawyers, and they know how to pick through things and quite frankly, screw you over. So, that's that's just something that they do. And you just have to, be very lucky or be very careful. And if you're very careful, you may never get anywhere because, they're always, oh, well, send me a copy of your script or, let me take a look. That's what they said to us. Oh, well, let's take a look at it and I'll get back to you. And then 2 months later, oh, no, we're not interested. And then 2 years later, it's on the screen. So it's just a matter of, being very honest, being very real. And, as I said, having compassion, and just being very humane. I never went to film school, but I explored some of them, and I never saw that on their curriculum. Nothing being taught about the business of the industry. It was all creative stuff, how to run a camera, how to operate a mic. Nobody was talking about the business, how to fundraise, how to get investors to invest in your film. And there's some really good attorneys out there that do that for independent filmmakers, but you got to find them. And they guide you along, because it's like any product. A film is like any product. So when you get investors, you might need to have a board of directors. You need to follow SEC laws. I mean, what filmmaker do you know, independent filmmaker knows how to do that? We just want to make something. Give me the camera. Can I make something, And you don't think of all of these other legalities and, non-disclosure agreements and, talent releases and all of those things. Filmmakers don't want to think about that. Otherwise, they would have gone to law school or, become an accountant or something. We just want to create stuff. So I just say you have to be as well-rounded as an independent filmmaker. You have to learn everything yourself. That's just the best way.
Next time on Hawaii Entertainment News.
Now, if at any time it becomes a situation where someone wants more than you modeling their clothing or makeup or hair or something like that, then that's something that you definitely have to be aware of. Situational awareness is a very big deal, okay? And it's not their responsibility to look out for you. It is your responsibility to look out for you. And if ever you are not feeling comfortable or safe, you have the right to leave. You have the right to bring company with you, so that you do feel safe, and feel comfortable enough to speak up. Don't just allow things to happen. And I think because it's modeling and we want it so bad, we want to be the girl who's on the cover of the magazine or who's getting all the special treatment. We'll just let things slide.
Hawaii Entertainment News, where we will talk about all the news that's happening around the film and entertainment industry in Hawaii.
told you so.
Enough! Are you okay?
Oh my gosh, he's Superman!
This is a video game, which means we all have special skills.
Is that it? I think so.